Call the meeting to order. It's the regular assembly meeting, March 6th, 2023. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Thomas.
Here.
Donna. Here. Bob.
Here.
Jeff. David.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Mark.
Here. Okay, it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Okay, next item on today's agenda is approval of minutes from the meeting on February 21st. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
If there's no changes, all those in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Excuse me. Now, item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda presented to us today. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
No hands coming up or people asking for changes. All those in favor of moving forward with the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move forward with what we've got here. Excuse me. Public hearings, there are none today. Bid awards, no bid awards. Are there any persons to be heard on items related to today's agenda? No one's called in or zoomed in, clerk? Okay, so no one in the audience expressing interest, so we'll move on to item 8, persons to be heard unrelated to today's agenda. Don't see any interest there either, so we'll move on to boards, commission, and committee reports. There are none. Item 10, consent agenda. There are no items there today. Report of other officers. Excuse me, Petersburg Medical Center update and Mr. Hofstetter. I don't see him Zoom. Oh, is he here? Oh, there he is. Hey, Phil, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you. I submitted a report. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just submitted a report for PMC, provides a high level overview in the last month. Since then, at the last board meeting, we approved the lower site at our board meeting for site selection, and look forward to putting in application for planning and zoning. We also, Bob Lynn and Steve helped put together a meeting related to just to meet with the department heads at the borough and just kind of go over the site selection, site planning, if there's any concerns. I don't know if there's anything else, but do you have any questions on my report or any updates related to those items?
And some members have questions of Mr. Hofstetter. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Phil. So the hospital board has decided on one site, or they narrowed it down to 2?
It's that lower site. That just from the footprint, it's this. There's 2 options on that site, but it's the same footprint. So we're looking at that lower site by Haugen.
And so just to follow up, so are you calling it the Knob Hill or the Creek View concept?
We haven't, that part hasn't necessarily been decided. It's just that area. That's the same area. So for right now, it would be the putting in for planning and zoning for that area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other assembly members have questions today for Mr. Hofstetter? Seeing none, thank you, Phil, for your report, and hopefully you're getting well.
Thank you. Yep.
That brings us to the next item. The next report is an audit report from BDO, and they're zooming in. So welcome, and you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vicky Shrestha. I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So I'm here, and George Barker is here with me too. I'm the assurance partner on the job, and George kind of helps me manage the job, and he's like the one that has the more insights into here. So if you have any questions, some of the questions either me or him can answer. Today we're gonna focus on the wrap-up document that was sent to you, and then I'm just gonna highlight a few parts of the financial statements. But first, I'd just like to start by thanking all of the staff at the borough that got us information to get the audit done. It is a big audit and takes quite a bit of time to do, and there's a lot more additional effort required on the staff's part to get the audit done. For 2022, you did implement the provision of GASB 87. And this required you to bring any leases that you have outstanding, like either as a lessee or a lessor, to bring, if they are non-cancelable long-term leases, those had to be brought into the books. And that was a significant exercise that between Jody and us, that we had to go through a lot of back and forth to get that done. And that is a significantly harder part of the audit for this year. So that I should let you know that Jody did a great job compiling all the information, asking us the questions in the right time. And so that is a new thing that's on the financials. And then to make life a little bit harder, you do have a lot of leases where you have you're acting as lessor, and bunch of areas being leased out over there. So that was a big exercise for this year, but we didn't have any concern coming out of that. Like everything was done. So now we go to the audit wrap-up document, and maybe I can share my screen. It might be a little bit easier to follow along if I share my screen, so that way you also know which part of the finance document I'm on. So let me just start by doing that. Please let me know if you see the front page of the audit wrap-up document. It's called the report to the Borough Assembly.
We do, Binky.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Excuse me for a minute. Could you turn it up just a little bit, please?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you do have the printed copy of the audit wrap-up document too. So I will also point out like which page it is. So we're on page 3. So basically, professional standards requires us to communicate with you regarding matters related to audit that, in our professional judgment, are significant and relevant in your responsibility in overseeing the financial reporting process. So basically, this document just covers some of those highlighted items that we believe is important in your role as overseeing the financial reporting process. So I'm going to go to the page called Status of the Audit, which is page 5. And we have completed our audit of the financial statements as of June 30. Your audit was subject to an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, since you receive money from federal sources and you report as a government too. The first bullet point over here, I always like to point this out. The objective of our audit was to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance about whether financial statements are free from material misstatements. What that means is we don't look at each and everything that goes through your financial statements. We do our risk assessment, and we introduce a concept of materiality, where higher dollar items have a better chance of being selected for test work. And then we go through all kinds of risk assessment procedure based on risk at the entity, prior audit results, and all that stuff, and design our audit procedures around that. And we also do perform a lot of random sampling throughout the process. And because you were subject to an audit in accordance with both uniform guidance for your federal funding and then for your state programs for your state funding. So that's why there was even more scrutiny in those areas where there's additional samples that are selected and tested, and additional requirements that are selected and tested just for those particular programs or grants that were subject to test work. The third bullet point over here, I think that's the most important one. We have issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on the financial statements. The next one, we have also issued an unmodified opinion on your federal single audit and your state single audit. And then one of the items here at the bottom, all records and information requested by BDO was freely available for inspection, and Management Corporation was excellent throughout the whole process. Following that, I'm going to go to page 6. Page 6 shows the results of the audit. One of the things I always like to also point out is the notes to your financial statements, which starts about page 17 or so of the audit, the report over there, that has all of your significant accounting policies and procedures. So those are included there. And then note 15 of the financials also has some of the recent accounting pronouncement that's going to have an effect on the financial statements in the future. Like I had indicated earlier, the big change for 2022 was the implementation of GASB 87 for leases, and that did bring in your lease receivables for a bunch of leases that were not included in the report in the same presentation manner as it is this year. And also to note that there is a lot of disclosures that accompany GASB 87. So if you look at your financial statements in the footnotes, there's additional 2 pages of information that got added in 2022 related to the leases too. Other than that, there were no significant changes in accounting policies and practices that we discussed with management or implemented by management. And then some of the significant estimates in your financials would be your allowance for uncollectible accounts or the discount rates used for the leases, your net pension and OPEB liabilities. I think I say this every year, but the information for that is obtained directly from the State of Alaska Division of Retirement. There is a separate audit done by a different entity for all of the entities that participate in PERS. So that allocation report, there is information related to Petersburg Borough that is extracted, and that's what's booked on your financial statement. So management does not actually make the estimates related to pension and OPEB liabilities. Those are directly based on that allocation done at the State of Alaska level. Following that, I'm going to skip on ahead to page 8. We talk about corrected and uncorrected misstatements. We didn't have any uncorrected misstatement to report. Corrected misstatements really relates to the booking the entry for the pension and OPEB that we usually assist with management with. We also just the actual booking of the lease liability. We ended up suggesting the entry, but management came up with the calculation for that number. And then another part, just to be aware, the financial statements do include your discretely presented component units. In your case, the school district and the hospital. We do want to just be clear that the Petersburg School District was audited by BDO, but the hospital was not audited by BDO, and it's also indicated in the opinion. Internal control over financial reporting. As part of our audit process, we just don't look at the financial information. We start by getting an understanding of what kind of internal controls you have in place related to your financial reporting process. And during that process, if we see any issues, we put it together into one of the 3 buckets described over here. A control deficiency, a significant deficiency, or a material weakness. Any deficiency that we deem to be significant deficiencies or material weakness would actually be presented as findings in the financial statements, because you're subject to an audit in accordance with government auditing standards. And then any control deficiencies, it depends on the situation. Normally, all our responsibility is just to get that information to management. As part of our audit, we didn't note any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We did note some small control deficiencies that are listed over here. I believe the first one of these, according to Talk with Jody, it's already been remediated. Couple of these other one, the super user risk, this is a common one that we encounter at pretty much any entities we audit throughout the state. It's one of those items where the different entities in the states are willing to live with. It's because it's just not, it's not possible not to make the director of finance or somebody a super user. That just poses some risk, but you have enough mitigating controls in your at the borough that we don't think it poses a risk enough to raise this risk up to significant deficiencies or material weakness. But since it's there, we just have to report it as control deficiency. Any other required communication, really, we are not aware of any consultation that management had with other accounting firms or somebody else regarding accounting matters. We didn't have any disagreements with management, and we didn't encounter any other issues that we need to report to you. So that's all I have for the audit wrap-up document. Any questions so far?
Are there any questions by any assembly members of the auditors? I'm not seeing any questions from the assembly.
Okay. After that, I was just gonna briefly highlight a few items on the financial statements, and then anything else you'd like me to talk about beyond that is going to be questions that you may have. So, all right. So on my sharing the screen, so now I'm gonna go to the financial statements itself, and I'm just gonna highlight a certain portion of the financial statements that I usually do every year. So I am gonna skip on. Actually, I should tell you that the financial statements do include the management discussion and analysis, and this was written by management. And really, if you wanted to get the summary of the result of the audit, if you didn't want to read through the whole financial statements, then management discussion and analysis is a good summary of all of the financial statements, as well as some of the significant items that happened during the year. That's also included here. So if there's no other part of the report you look at, the 4 or 5 pages of the management discussion and analysis would be the one I would focus on. So then I'm gonna go all the way to page, page 20 of the financial statements. So page 20 of the financial statements is your statement of net position. Your statement of net position is basically a balance sheet. It shows all of your assets and deferred outflow of resources, all of your liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, basically everything that you owe, and the difference between your assets and your liabilities, basically it is your net position for the year. At the end of 2022, total assets and deferred outflow of resources for the borough was 163 million. Out of that, 70.5 million was in your governmental activities and 92.5 million was in your enterprise business type activities. Majority of that number is made up of your capital assets, for almost $45 million for the government activities and $63 or so million for your business type activities. And then the other big chunk of your assets are in your cash and investments, 34 million at the end of 2022, split between $20.8 million for governmental activities and $13.6 million in your business type activities. So one thing to note on this is for your governmental activities, the first two schedules are the only two places where you will see capital assets, your pension liabilities, or any loans or bonds. On the governmental activities report on a modified accrual basis, so they don't normally report long-term assets and liabilities, but these statements do incorporate those long-term assets and liabilities. Next page, page 21 is your liabilities. Your total liabilities at the end of 2022 was $28.7 million. 17.9 of that was in your business type activities, and 10.7 is in your governmental activities. Just to note that majority of that $10.6 million was your bonds payable, and then 7.6 million was the pension liability at the end of the year. And we should note that the pension amount is not due and payable like a loan or anything. There's the way that liability is paid anyways is basically just 22% of each employee's payroll that participates in PERS. This leaves you with your net position at the end of the year of $127 million for the entire borough. 56.4 is in the general governmental funds, and 70.6 million was in your business type activities. And also note that a bunch of the net position is actually not liquid, right? So they are invested in your capital assets. Your unrestricted fund or net position at the end of the year was $10 million for your governmental activities and almost $14 million for your business type activities. So after that, I'm gonna quickly go through your governmental balance sheet and income statement, and then just a brief overview of your business type activities where you can find the information there. So your governmental activities, note that as I was indicating earlier, just the two front A1 and A2 of the financial statements includes those long-term assets and liabilities for governmental funds, but any financial statements after that one, so starting in B1, these are more on your budget basis for the year, and it does not include long-term assets and liabilities. So excluding those activities, your total assets in your governmental activities was $20,095,000. Majority of that, $6 million, was in your general fund, 1.3 million was this new ARPA fund, and then the rest of your funds are considered non-major, and then the detailed activity of what makes up this is also included in the supplementary information in the financial statement. So if you wanted to look at what that is made of, that is also included in the supplementary information in the financial statements. Majority of this $20 million of assets was in your cash and cash equivalents, so it's $16.7 million. Your total liabilities at the end of 22 was $3.1 million, leaving you with a fund balance of $16.8 million. A chunk of that, $5.7 million, is in your general fund, and all of that is considered unassigned for your purpose. For your non-major governmental fund, total fund balance was almost $11.2 million. Following that, I'm just gonna quickly show you where the business type activities detail is. So that starts on Exhibit C1, which is on page 28. And the first page over here shows all of your assets and deferred outflow of resources. Like you can see the breakdown of your business type activities. Out of that $90 million of assets, 26 million is in your electric fund, 18 million in the water, 11.2 in the wastewater, and then 27.5 is in your harbor facilities. Like you can see here, majority of your assets for your business type activities is invested in your capital assets. So out of the 90.2 million, 63.5 million is your capital assets. And then the other big chunk over here is the $13.5 million in your cash. And then for this year, the new line items that you see as a result of implementing GASB 87, majority of the effect was on your harbor and port facilities. So that effect of change of that standard is you now have a new line item called lease receivable of 1.35 million. And then that also adds something called a deferred inflow of resources of that same amount, really close to that number, because that amount you haven't received yet and you cannot spend yet. So that's shown there. Your total liabilities, again, $18 million for your enterprise activities, and you can see the breakdown of the different funds right here. Most of your liability is your general obligation bond and the amount related to your loans to AEDC, and then your pension liability. As far as revenue and expenses for your business type activities, that's on Exhibit C2 on page 31. This one just gives you that same breakdown by the different funds. Total revenue for 2022 was almost $13 million, $12.9 million. As you can see, majority of your revenue is from your electric utility of 6.3. One of the things you'd always look at over here is the income and loss numbers for your business type activities, because the business type activities are set up more to make some money. But you can see as far as cash flow, you're not doing as bad. Like if you compare your change in net position to your depreciation, that should tell you what's going on with cash flow over there too. But majority of, once you take depreciation into the picture, other than assisted living and wastewater utilities, you did report a loss on the activities. So that's really the gist of what I had today for the presentation. Like I was saying earlier, you were subject to a federal and state single audit both this year, and there was no issues we found with those. And so it's an unmodified clean opinion, no findings, nothing along those lines for your federal and state single audit too. I went through a lot of information there. So any questions, concerns?
Member Lynn has a question.
Yeah, this may be more of a Jody question, but from the requirements we have with the federal funds we received over time, does this meet all our obligations for reporting, or are we going to have to do something in addition to that now from those funds?
Answer that. A lot of the ARPA grants that we've gotten have a lot of different stipulations. I have to report quarterly on some, I report annually on some, and then we also, of course, have to do this. And normally for state, and I'm not sure about federal money, but state money, you have to, approve a budget every year as well.
But for this year, then this will satisfy for fiscal for 22.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions today of the auditors? Member Mucci?
Thank you. You mentioned on page 31 about the income loss from operation.
Mhm.
Could you explain again what that is? And do we ever get a chance to recoup some of those income losses?
That would be more of a Jody question, I would think.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
On page 31, it talks about income loss from operations. And it lists enterprise funds, the major enterprise funds.
Through the mayor, I'll jump in while
Oh, yeah.
Jody gets it.
Sure.
So what that number does is it also includes depreciation
Mhm.
as an expense. It's not a cash expense, but it is something we take into account. If you, as Vicky said earlier, if you back out the depreciation, you get a little more of a idea of what we're cash making. And the two that kind of give us a problem is assisted living. In this particular year, this was wastewater. But anyway, so that number across there includes depreciation expense. If you back out depreciation, you get an idea of kind of on a cash basis, what we've made or lost.
Thank you.
Other thing I would just add is like whenever you do major upgrades or changes, you do go out and get bonds or get some assistance from federal and state sources.
Are there any other questions today? Okay, thank you for your report, and sounds like usual, the staff has done a good job. So,
Oh, yeah, amazing.
perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving down the agenda, there's no printed mayor's report today. I've been out of town for a few weeks. So that brings us to the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Wanted to give Derek Gibb and his crew a big thank you for their job in working on keeping the elderly housing parking lot cleared through our big snowstorms. We have had COVID sweeping through town, if you weren't aware of that, and it's been in the manner. Please limit your visits to elderly housing and assisted living for the next week or so as we kind of get through that. Our HUD paperwork has been submitted for the annual automatic rent increase at elderly housing. The operating cost adjustment for 2023 will be 6%, will be effective July 1st, 2023. Petersburg Police Department, Alaska State Troopers, and other law enforcement partners, along with the Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department, will be holding their second annual chili cook-off on March 10th at the Elks Club, beginning at 5:30. Everyone is welcome. According to the volunteers, they're going to win all of this, so you might want to hold them up to that. It's open to the public. Event will have 5 categories: regular chili, spicy chili, wild game chili, veggie chili, and an open category, which is anything not listed. Chief Kerr says he's actually going to make real chili, which does not include beans. So we'll see how that turns out. Residents may still obtain up to 10 buckets of traction sand from Public Works free of charge. Anyone wanting sand through this program should stop by the Public Works office to check in before loading any sand. We're finalizing the specifications for the 2 new police department vehicles that are due to be delivered this spring. And commercial deliveries to the Baylor have been trending up for the last year, with demolition and remodeling debris accounting for much of the increase. It's been a nice boost to the department's revenue, although we don't expect it. We do expect it to be temporary. The maintenance crew has been occupied with snow removal and heating system work and attending to other routine work orders as time permits, and just wanted to thank them for everything. All of our department heads are currently working on our FY24 budget preparation. Firefighter 1 training continues Saturdays with Ryan. There are 4 participants, and the class will conclude at the end of March. Ryan did connect up with the manufacturer for the new fire truck last week. They told us production on the cab had been delayed by 2 weeks. This puts delivery estimates around mid-May for the fire truck. Our ETT, emergency trauma technician class, has finished. Thanks to our 6 new ETTs for dedicating the time for the class. We had a bit of an issue with the state, who sent us a letter stating that our ambulance certification was due to expire in 9 days, even though we had already received the new certificate. Our medical director, Dr. Mark DeSillo, and Josh Rathman were able to clear this up with the state, which turned out to be an error on their part. The emergency shelter equipment that the borough bought during COVID has now been stored in the communication trailer bay on shelves installed by building maintenance, thanks to Jim and Sam. We did have some issues recently on the air brakes for the water tender stored at Scow Bay. Thanks to Martin for helping set up the washdown truck as a standby unit until this was repaired. The volunteer fire department would like to ask the public to help assist us with keeping the hydrants clear of snow. A shoveled hydrant makes for a lot easier work and helps us help you much faster. If you notice a hydrant has been snowed in around your home, please clear a path to it and around it. Power and Light staff recently took delivery of the new Argo tracked vehicle that allows them to visit the Cabin Creek Reservoir in the wintertime. The new unit works well, and they were able to get their work done in a fraction of the time compared to the old unit. Thanks to Motor Pool for helping procure the replacement. P&D engineers have completed an alternatives assessment for the Pump Station 4 project. Staff is currently reviewing the information and we'll have a meeting with P&D to discuss the final direction for the project insofar as locations of the new pump station is wet well, method of installation for the force main, and the gravity sewer and the installation extent of the electrical work needed. The Blind Slough Hydro project is moving along. McGee Dawson has posted many submittals in preparation for beginning the work in May. McMillan, who is the project engineer, are reviewing submittals and getting input back to the contractor as needed. Valves that were ordered by the borough are progressing towards shipping dates, and a spare pump has arrived for the hatchery's use during the project. We are still waiting for a control cabinet that will replace the older pump controls ahead of the hydro project start. The only major issue we're struggling with is the FERC approval of our license amendment and construction plan approval. Recently, Carl and others have been in touch with FERC's DC office to inquire about the license amendment, and to date we have not received a solid answer on when they will complete their review and approval. Our DC lobbyist is involved at this point, as well as both Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski's offices. And we're just trying to keep some pressure on them so that we don't experience delays and end up with associated monetary claims from our contractor. Assemblymember Lynn and I attended the Alaska Municipal League Legislative Conference. We met with Senator Stedman, Representative Himshoot, and members of the South Coast ADOT team. Sounds like it will be a long legislative session with the primary issue, the size of the dividend versus school funding. Borough did shut down some operations early on Wednesday, March 1st due to some hazardous road conditions. Hopefully this was the last snowstorm of the winter. Borough staff will be communicating with our largest union, PMEA, to start the process of negotiating a new contract. And we're going through the process now of valuations on borough buildings for insurance purposes. The assumption is they've probably gone up with increases in contracting costs and stuff. And we want to make sure we are covered in that. So we'll be looking at it. And that's it. Let's look at the questions.
Any questions of the manager today? Member Lynn?
Yeah, it's not on your list, Steve, but are we making any progress on the issue related to snow loads on future buildings?
I'm not sure I'd call it progress, but I can speak to that through the mayor. It's actually set by the American Society of Civil Engineers. They then give that information to a group called ICC, or the International Code Council, who then puts it in a book. The state of Alaska has adopted those, which is the International Building Code, and we're supposed to follow those. We noticed when we had a couple of commercial buildings come up that the snow load for Petersburg was set at 150 pounds per square foot, which seems to be very high when you compare us to Wrangell and Juneau, which are at 50 and 60. So we didn't understand it. Ray started with the state fire marshal who does those commercial inspections. Basically the state fire marshal, the gentleman that's in that role right now, is an acting position, but he said that it should be 150, and that's what he's going to continue to enforce. So we went through the process of trying to get hold of somebody with ICC. Both Ray and I have spoke to their chief structural engineer, who works for the people who write the code books. His basically response to me was he has nothing to do with it. He is just supposed to look at it. The number actually comes from the structural engineer people. I've reached out to them and have not yet gotten an answer back on, is there a way to challenge that or at least get a letter? We've been told that the new one will drop to 95, which is good news from 150. But unfortunately, that's for the 2024 code books, and they won't be released until 2027. I don't understand that, to be honest with you, but that's how that works. So we're trying to find out, can we get a letter or something from them that states it will change in 2024 and the books won't be out until 2027. So can we start, using 95? That letter would clearly have to be okay with the state of fire marshal before, since they're the ones who enforce that. And again, we don't have an answer back yet. This has taken a while to get to this point, and I sent the email to the structural engineer folks just about a little over a week ago. So hopefully we'll hear more. I'll keep pestering them. I know Ray and Liz have been working on it as well. We brought it up with both of our legislators in Juneau, just as an FYI, although they can't help us with these folks, which are national.
Thank you. That's going to add substantial cost to any new construction around here. Anywhere from a quarter to a third more cost to any structure that's being built in the future, if we don't get that back down into some reasonable sense.
Two of the proposed, new commercial buildings in town, one would be $50,000 more and the other one would be $100,000 more. I've been involved in this discussion as well, and thanks for looking into it in Juneau. And I know Senator Stedman's office was looking into it, and doesn't sound like we're getting firm answers. It doesn't make sense.
No, sir.
Common sense why we're twice as much as Wrangler, 3 times as much. But anyway, that's, you don't know the lay of the land. I guess that's what happens. So any other questions? Member Marsh, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. So I guess my first question is that with the new HUD OCAF paperwork or the approvals for the adjustments on the housing for the elderly, is that going to affect the numbers of residents who will stay here?
Through the mayor, probably not. Most of the folks who that rate applies to, they're getting their rent paid by HUD. So the rate increase is really more an increase for the federal government than it is for local residents.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the Blinds to the Hydro project, is there a potential FERC visit planned for the Washington DC trip? In case we need to move them along?
If it gets to DC before this is solved, we might have a problem. But yes, Sebastian is asked to kind of reach out and find out who we would talk to at FERC. Likely the topic will be best broached with our delegation in person as well, more so than even FERC. I mean, Carl can add in here, but let's just say FERC has not been overly cooperative, even with the delegation. They have their own set of rules, and that's kind of what they keep sticking to, is that they can't release how long it'll take. And so we're just going to keep talking about it. I mean, Carl, did I say anything that you might want to correct?
That's exactly right. They have a process. Per their regulations, they can't talk to us about their schedule or any potential outcome of their review of the project and the license amendment. And it's very frustrating. We just want to know a time. If we knew they were going to be done in July, then we could talk to the contractor and get some things squared away, but they won't tell us, they won't give us a timeline at all. So it's very frustrating. We started this process last July, so we did not anticipate that we would be here, in this nervous situation at this point with a contractor that's ready to mobilize here in a month and a half.
The other questions I have, one of them regards to the upcoming PMEA negotiations. What's the schedule like for sitting down with the assembly and looking for having a conversation about the direction we'd like to go?
We're having a meeting through the mayor, I'm sorry, with all the department heads towards the end of this week to talk about issues that they may or have or not have as far as the contract. Once that's done, we'll schedule a meeting with the assembly just to say, here's where we stand on things. We're likely gonna, negotiate the contract once that, and probably try to focus on just the economics issues rather than making changes to the rest of the contract, in the hope that we can get something agreed upon. I expect them to have a pretty high ask with inflation on wages and stuff, and so it should be challenging.
My last question was on the report you gave us about your trip to Juneau. You mentioned that it says it appears there was additional discussion on extending the Cake Road from 12 to 6 Mile. Are we involved in that discussion, or how is that discussion going on?
It's brought up by ADOT. They mentioned in passing that they've been asked to look at it, and at this point, we're not involved in that conversation. We're gonna try to find out more, and see what they have to say. Bob, did you hear anything different?
Nope, I think you hit it right on.
So I have a question, if no other assembly members do. You were talking about our ambulance license, and Dr. Tasillo, is he still the medical director in
Um,
Petersburg then?
Aaron, yeah, I think so.
For the foreseeable future, Dr. Tasillo intends to still be our medical director.
Okay, if I'm correct, is he not employed with the Petersburg Medical Center anymore? Did he retire?
He did retire. He has mentioned to me offhand his plans to return part-time after certain retire. He has to remain unaffiliated with the hospital for a certain amount of time due to retirement reasons. But once enough time has passed, he can go back, and
Yeah,
I believe that's his intention.
kind of curious. Thanks for the answer. Yeah. So, if there's no other questions of the manager, we'll move to new business because there is no items under unfinished business. And, one item under new business, ordinance 2023-03. This is an ordinance proposing amendments to the home rule charter of the Petersburg Borough to allow borough employees, including employees working at the Petersburg Medical Center and the Petersburg School District, to serve on certain borough boards and commissions, and directing that the proposed charter amendment be submitted to the qualified voters of the borough. This is the first reading. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion been made by member Muthy, seconded by member Lynn. Any discussion? Member Marsh.
Yes, thank you. My big concern here is there very likely could exist some conflicts of interest by including this. And with the 3 boards that are listed here, my memory tells me there have not been too many vacancies when it's time for elections. So I don't know that that is where our, lack of a better word, apathy comes in and getting people to run. Seems like those are the more popular and people want to get involved in those boards. I think it's more the planning and zoning, the public safety and things like that, library board, where we have vacancies. So due to my concern with conflicts of interest, I am hesitant to support this, but also happy to see that this would definitely have to go before the voters.
Any other discussion on this ordinance?
I have a question.
Member Newman.
It seems like in the past, I remember one in particular, one hospital employee that was on at the time of city council. So at what point did we depart from that?
Through the mayor, I'm going to try to answer this. So this is Debbie's thing. So I apologize if I have to defer on some of this. We found that this was in the charter kind of after the fact. In other words, we weren't enforcing it for a very long time. And there are people who have served, for example, been a school employee that have served on the assembly or vice versa. And so when in looking through that, it was like, oops, we need to fix this. If this is going to be allowed, then we need to fix the charter because it's actually in charter. It's not an ordinance. And this is the process you have to go through. So this has happened a few times in the past and no one didn't think anything of it. To be honest with you. I mean,
So there was never a change to allow people to do this. It was just an oversight.
sir. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, just for clarification.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely support this ordinance in its first reading. I respect Member Marsh's concerns. We would hope if there was somebody on the board and they were to make a decision that would affect them or an immediate family member monetarily, especially that they would defer from being involved in that vote or the discussion. So that's my input on this. So any other discussion? Member Newman.
Comment is, yeah, I don't have a problem with it. You know, I mean, if somebody works at the hospital, can't serve on the hospital board, and same with the school board. So I think this, you know, there wouldn't be a conflict. I mean, oftentimes people, you know, get upset about something, they have an extra grind, so I'm gonna get on and change it. And I don't think that's beneficial to society. But this has provisions to prevent that. So I think this just opens it up to people that hopefully have a lot to contribute.
If there's no other input, on this first reading, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
No,
David,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the first reading of ordinance 2023-03 passes with a 6-1 vote with member Marsh opposed. Brings us to the next item on the agenda, and this is approval of Tim Chittenden, his appointment to the local emergency planning committee in the position of environmental advisor. And he's supplied us with a letter, so I'd entertain a motion to approve Tim Chittenden's appointment.
So moved.
second.
Any discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the local the LAPC did meet last week and I accepted Tim's letter and this is just getting the assembly approval, but I think this is just a matter of filling vacant seats that have been vacant for a couple of years and this is just one more person who's agreed to help us out. So yeah, I'm voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Any other input? Clerk call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes,
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you for your interest, Mr. Chittenden. You are on the advisory board. Communications, we have some communications that are listed. And if you're interested in seeing what they are, you can go to the Borough website, look at today's agenda, and they're all posted there. Item 17, assembly discussion items. There are none listed. Item A under that is assembly member comments. Any assembly members have comments today? Okay, recognitions. Are there any recognitions? And a motion to adjourn.
so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, meeting's adjourned, 12:50.